Now, I've read the book, not trying to get brownie points, but I've read the book. And the general kind of feeling seems to be a kind of calm down. Let's look at this, properly, mathematically, rationally. We don't need to be that worried. And when we were talking about this earlier, you said, because there's a story at the beginning of the book where you talk about when you went to give this talk at Google and you were learning about what they were trying to do with medical data, and your publisher at the time, or your publicist at the time, was a lot more concerned than you were about issues of privacy and things. And you said, maybe it's just my personality. How much do you think that affects your general overlook on whether we should be worried about what algorithms can do?
Yeah, I think it does definitely affect. So I sort of came from the perspective that we shouldn't be worried about algorithms. Then I got very worried about algorithms. And then I end up coming to the conclusion that there's lots of things we shouldn't be worried about. And the things we shouldn't be worried about are the personality algorithms, they're the fake news, they're the echo chambers. The things we should be worried about are the things like the discriminatory nature of algorithms, that we basically train algorithms to read every document ever written, and we use those algorithms then to inform web searches. So those introduce all sorts of problems. So I think, yes, maybe I am biased, and I describe myself in the book as just a sort of middle-class man who's decided to try and solve this problem. And I probably am biased in the first place, but I do still think there are quite a few things left to be worried about. You don't remove all of the problems.
But you've definitely said that the personality algorithms don't work. In fact, that was one of the titles of one of your slides.
Yes.
Is that they could never work, or just with the data sets that they have available to them, they can't work? So is it something that we should maybe worry about for future?
So it's not the data sets that are limitation, because Mikhail Kosinski, he got a very big data set and fitted pretty thoroughly to these. And he disagrees with me the degree to which it does work. He thinks that it is quite powerful and it really does work. So we had quite long discussions about this. And I don't think that it really works in the sense that it can predict things. So now, yes, so it's the algorithms which are the limitation. So you'd have to develop even better algorithms. And what you'd have to do, I think, is solve these types of really difficult artificial intelligence questions which we just haven't managed to solve. So I think that's the limitation. It's an algorithmic step, not just having more data.
Okay, fair enough. But it is something that could maybe work far, far in the future.
Well, even that I'm skeptical about. So I spent a lot of time writing about this, finding if you compare where we are now in intelligence, so what animal, most of my work is about mathematical biology, so what animal can we currently simulate the intelligence of? We can't do a human. Turns out we can't do a dog. Then I went down to insects. There was no way we could do a bumblebee, far too difficult. Then I took this nematode, which has got 900 neurons, and we still can't simulate a nematode. And so then I went down to this, I'd worked with amoebas called these slime molds, which you've maybe seen. They can solve mazes, and we can't actually model a slime mold, which is a singular cellular organism. Then finally, I think we're somewhere near to modeling a bacteria. We haven't quite got there yet. I think we're maybe just past a virus, but not quite up to a bacteria. And that's the level we're currently at. And so would you want to, I don't think a bacteria could analyze your Facebook data and tell you your personality.
So how much of our concerns then do you think can be blamed on the fact that people who work in Silicon Valley need to hype their ability to use algorithms to make all sorts of predictions about us?
Yeah, there's an interesting, so people I talk to in Silicon Valley who are actually working on them, most of them were very, they weren't keen on hyping what they do at all. So they were very kind of skeptical. A lot of them were said, general artificial intelligence is hundreds, if not thousands of years away. So there was an interesting difference between how what they do is reported and how they talk about it to each other. Some of them are very excited about it, but I'd say it's maybe 70-30, that 70% of them don't really think that it's as exciting as they thought it would be. I mean, it's been an amazing thing for mathematicians, so it's impossible for me to hire a good PhD student anymore, because they just go off and they get paid a lot more than me, working for Google and Microsoft and so on. And that's both good and bad. That it's easy to get a job as a mathematician, but it's not so good for research.
I feel like all of this talk of Cambridge Analytica in the news, even if it doesn't quite work as you say, it's made people a lot more cynical about things like algorithms and data privacy and the way they use Facebook and things like that. Do you think that's a positive move, or do you think that there are dangers in allowing people to blame tech and algorithms for kind of society's ills?
I have a lot of difficulty with these types of problems because it's because I'm just a mathematician, right? So what I've done is I've written a book about how these algorithms work and what you should and shouldn't be scared about. I think, of course, it's good that algorithms are in the news and people understand them. And I think we were talking about this before. 2 years ago, people didn't even know the word algorithm. And now it's really big and everyone's talking about it. It's difficult for me to say if it's a good or a bad thing overall. I mean, I'm just kind of keen on the idea of this is how these things work and this is how they affect your life.
Fair enough. Shall we open for the audience then? Because I'm sure they've got lots of questions for you. And we have, I think, 3 roaming microphones. So can we have hands up for anyone who has a question right now? And I'm going to see if I can pick.
Hi. My question's about self-driving cars. They've recently been in the news where people have died, and I was wondering where you thought that technology is, and do you think that is around the corner? Is it 10 years down the track, 50 years down the track, or something like that?
Yeah, the problem with self-driving cars are not so much the cars themselves, it's the humans that are driving the other cars that are the real problem. I mean, if we just got rid of all the humans and allowed the robots to drive all the cars, then I think that is just around the corner. It would work. But the problem is that we don't behave in a... So you can't take away the social situation of driving a car. If I'm sitting in the car and you're sitting in another car, we can have eye contact and we can understand what each other are going to do. That sort of eye contact and understanding our feelings and emotions is something we would have to solve a much more difficult general artificial intelligence problem. So that's, I think, the big limitation. I think there might be some towns and cities where they take away the human drivers, just put in the artificial intelligence cars, and probably you'll be able to get a reasonably good solution. But I find it difficult to see how we can actually drive at the same time as the robot cars.
Okay, we have more hands up. Yes, we've got one up here. Hello.
Hello, thank you for the wonderful talk.
Oh, thank you.
I wondered what people from the whole world think about algorithms. Does everyone have the same view on them? Or is it all different? Let's say, is it different in the UK to Norway or Sweden to China?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. I think it's really, really different. Part of it is that people have only just realized what algorithms are and how they control your lives. And so I think certainly in Sweden, people have a very positive attitude. Where I live, I think they tend to have a very positive attitude. They see themselves as like a high-tech center, and we should be at the forefront of algorithms. So I do even think just between Sweden and Britain, people seem to have a different feeling about algorithms. How people think about them in Japan and Korea, I'm not quite sure.
Okay.
There have been stories about algorithms being used in China to kind of judge how trustworthy civilians are and things like that. So I imagine they might have a different opinion on algorithms than we do. But you'd have to do some reading about that, I think.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to come down here? Because you're the first hand I saw, so I want to make sure I do come to you.
Yeah, so thinking about the credit crunch, there was a lot of concern that many of the models had baked in the same errors. I just wondered if you thought in regard to these sorts of algorithms, if there's a risk from monoculture or sort of all doing the same thing, or if there's more diversity.
Right, you mean that so they ended up all doing the same thing, yes. I think the main risk is the over-trusting of algorithms and making mistakes. This isn't an algorithm problem, or an algorithm example, but in my research group, we study a lot of fish movements. And one of my colleagues, he used this this very advanced method, and he found out this really clear signal. And we spent a lot of time getting very excited about this. And it turned out that at the end of it, the signal was that the fish were just swimming around the bottom of the tank and not using the rest of the tank. And that was an exciting result. And that often happens in these algorithmic judgments. People will get very excited about a statistical pattern that they've seen. They'll start to base their judgment on this statistical pattern, but it's actually something that we knew already. And that, I think, is the equivalent. That's going to be the problem that's the analog to the financial market problem.
Okay, hands up high again. Oh, we have another one at the front.
Surely the real problem with algorithms isn't whether or not it's a threat to being, in terms of how high the chance of it being successful is, but rather in terms of you have people using really, really kind of low accuracy algorithms for all sorts of important things, like the sentencing algorithm mentioned earlier. Surely the real problem is people just deciding, we'll use an algorithm without any idea of how accurate it can be or what the problems will be with it.
I think that's exactly right. And so Cathy O'Neill, in her book, Weapons of Math Destruction, she takes lots of examples how in America these types of algorithms are applied if you're going to get credit exactly in these sentencing sorts of situations. And so I think what I'm adding to that is looking at the algorithms that are more behind the social media that we use and so on, and how they end up spreading types of things, and we misunderstand the outcomes of those types of algorithms. So it is also this problem that algorithms get it wrong, which it comes back to time and time again.
Yeah, we had one around here, yes.
Thank you. You focused on the concept of working versus not working, but statistics, that sort of binary judgment only really applies in the individual situation. If you go to an election where there are large numbers, if I can swing a 50-50 prediction to a 60-40, that's incredibly significant in terms of my effectiveness, my ability to get efficacy in terms of advertising spend or gambling or anything like that. So surely by definition that must have worked.
Well, it's not quite as simple as that, because you'll be sending, if you take the example of the type of advert you're sending, if you start targeting traditional people with a neurotic type of advert, then you can be having a counterproductive effect on that type of person. So though you're going to get slightly better targeted adverts, you're not going to get this type of personalized effect that you really need in order to do this. I don't think, I mean, okay, the important point here is that you can actually get that focused effect in a better way. So if you, for example, target a gun owner magazine versus a car owner magazine, there you can put in an advert which is targeted to those people. So traditional advertising can already target certain groups, and it can target it much better than the 60-40 targeting you get from the Facebook personality approach.
Hello, I've also read the book, and it's great. Sorry, and it's really nice to read some really in-depth and well-informed skepticism about algorithms. But I wondered, I mean, you know, it's a field that you're in. What are the areas where you think actually algorithms can really help us and are a very positive thing and have real potential? And you know, what should we be looking at with optimism about what algorithms can do for us, where it's not just hype and snake oil?
Well, I mean, the thing is that they are just doing amazing things in our lives all the time. Like, I mean, maybe listening to good songs on Spotify isn't the most important things in our lives, but that's a sort of everyday thing where our life is just made so much better. We just hear songs we've forgotten, and they come back to us, and we just fall in love with them again. We get in connection on Facebook. We have so many connections with people that we wouldn't otherwise have connections with. And Twitter, I mean, I'm a big Twitter fan. I just love Twitter. That has really changed my life. I've suddenly got in contact with, we just have these nerdy football arguments about statistics, and I just love it. I mean, so, yeah, I don't know what's going to happen next, But the things that just have happened in the last year are just amazing. I mean, there is so many positive things about algorithms. So maybe I wasn't banging enough on about this, but there is just such a good stuff. So okay, let's weigh this against, yes, there's a problem with discrimination in algorithms, and there's a load of algorithms which don't work. I mean, I still think the positives much outweigh the negatives, and there'll be lots and lots more fun things to happen. You know, all this like rainbow vomit stuff, that's just great. I mean, all those things, there's just so much good stuff.
Oh, we have one right down here.
One of the things that I was thinking about as you were talking is that if it's not the algorithms themselves that are the issue, what is it? Is it a belief about what the algorithms can do, which leads companies and organizations to collect all this data, which is then the thing that really upsets people? It's not necessarily what's being done with it per se, but the fact that these companies and organizations have all this information.
Yeah, so they do want to have as much information as possible because they think that they can use it. And again, that's great if you're a computer scientist because you can get a job and you can tell people that you can use it, but you can't always use it as effectively as the companies would like to do. So I talked to, for example, TUI, who are travel agents, and they're very practical about how they use the data. They understand that they can't do so much more, but they do things like, if you've been to Spain on holiday twice in a row, they'll start to send you, in February, they'll start to send you adverts for Portugal. And that's an incredibly effective advertising campaign, which is just a bit of common sense, really. It's nothing to do with big data. You've got a few bits of data about where people went on holiday, and you can start to sell them other holidays. So it often comes down to common sense use of data, which is the most powerful way of changing people's behavior.
We have one over here, the person in blue. Sorry, is there something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, no, I wanted to go back to, I was thinking about this point to do with the effectiveness of this 40-60. So one thing I often go on about is this campaign, the Momentum campaign in the UK for the Labour Party. That is an effective use of algorithms and memes and spreading. This thing where Jeremy Corbyn did the Stormzy rap, that is a really effective advertising campaign which is lifted up by an algorithm and spread. And so yeah, if you're a Labour supporter, then you should be, or if, yeah, maybe if, no, it's not that. If you're a Jeremy Corbyn supporter, then you should be really proud of the way that Momentum use algorithms.
In your talk, you mentioned in 2007 doing a large personality test and combining that with a lot of Facebook data and doing an analysis on that. Do you have a concern that in the wake of the Cambridge Analytica story, that the big IT companies are going to be less transparent and it's going to become harder to get hold of big data and see what they're doing with that sort of thing?
That happened already. That happened 5 years ago, I think, that they realized. So, yeah, I mean, of course, there's been a lot in the news, but they started to realize already 5 years ago that this is going to be a problem. So when I first started doing research in this area, it was quite easy to email Facebook and say, could I have a load of data, please? And they would say, yeah, no problem, there you go, do some research. But now they closed down that, and I saw that my personality, which was the study that Mikhail Kosinski, that's actually disappeared 3 weeks ago. That was a resource for researchers, an amazing resource of personality data which is gone. And so that's happened already. The research data is disappearing. So then you're left with Twitter, and Twitter is not a reliable representation of our social behavior. It's a very strange place. And you can get data from Twitter, but you can't get data from everywhere else. And I don't think that that's going to change now. I think that those Wild West days of research have disappeared.
Presumably GDPR will affect that as well, the General Data Protection Regulation.
Yes, yeah, that's going to certainly affect it even more. I don't even know, I mean, Twitter might have to stop storing what they've got as well. I'm not sure that the Twitter data will be as available as it was. So I might, that map I made of myself, I might not be able to make that this time next year.
Gosh. All right, hands up high if we have any more questions. I just want to make sure I get everyone who's kind of hesitant. Okay, so we have one here and one over there. Okay, so we'll go with you first.
Hi, thanks for a great talk. One question that came to mind when you were predicting neuroticism was, are some personalities easier to predict than others?
Yes, I should have mentioned that actually. So openness is quite easy to predict. Like Lady Gaga fans are apparently very open. And so yeah, there's 67% so I had this 60% relationship for neuroticism. So 60%, 7% chance of identifying an open person, somebody who goes to a lot of concerts. And so, and that's great for advertisers to know that, because they can identify those types of people. Lady Gaga fans like bright colors, for example, and you should show them bright color adverts, apparently, and they will like them. So there is certain trends that you can use.
Yeah, so then taking that back to something like the election, if you could predict someone that's very outgoing to a higher accuracy, then you target them and then they're more likely to spread that news.
Yeah, I think that's one way of doing it, but I think creating spreadable material is the best way to do it. That's this whole idea of going viral. So I look in the book quite a lot at the also liked algorithm. So this was the algorithm that basically Amazon created for if you like this book, you might like this book, and it's based on what other people who bought that book before liked. And that's now been used by every company, have these also liked things. And that's why things go viral. And so exploiting that advert, that mechanism, that algorithm can get you a long way, a lot further than with any of the personality stuff.
Okay, thanks. And just one last one. Do you think social media is good or bad for society?
That's why, I answer this question. I avoid trying to answer that. So, right, I like it. I think it's good. The problems with social media are more to do with the addictiveness of it, I find. And this is just a personal answer. Sometimes I just use Twitter a bit too much, or I wish I personally could cut down on these things. But I don't think keeping people in touch with others across the whole world is just a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Thank you. Over here.
I was wondering, have you got any advice for somebody who would be on the receiving end of sales for artificial intelligence? How would you spot artificial intelligence snake oil?
That's a really good question. I have to think up a way of doing that. I can do it quite easily, I think, looking at web pages and so on, but I can't tell you exactly what the hallmarks of it are. Most of them are offering some sort of snake oil, I think. You have to prove that these things work. The answer is I don't really know, but that's a really good question. I have to think of what that should.
You have to hire David as a consultant. He'll work on a gut
exactly.
feeling.
Pay me a lot of money, and I'll tell you which pages are.
Okay. Do we have any more questions? Because if not, I think we're going to. Oh, okay. Right. We'll do these two if they're quick.
It's a very quick one. You hear about companies using algorithms in, for example, recruitment and things of that kind. You pointed out that, this could be really have a real downside. So do you think there are any areas where we ought to start regulating the use of algorithms now, or do you think it's fine, to let it keep developing and growing as it is now?
Yeah, I think that's a big debate area. You said that was a little question. It's a massive question.
Well, you said it quickly.
So Mikhail Kosinski, who I spoke to, he made a very powerful argument that we are very sexist, we're totally racist, we just make up our judgments just like that about everything. So we are totally useless at making recruitment decisions. His point that we shouldn't be anywhere near to making a recruitment decision, everything should be left over to an algorithm. I think that's an extreme point of view. So I don't think we should remove algorithms from recruitment altogether, but I think we should be careful to think about the fact that we've built in a lot of our biases into these algorithms too. So yes, there should be regulation about those types of things, but the regulation, I think it should be at the level of the final decision that is made to check that you're making you have a correct process and you're making good decisions. I go in detail the whole argument about the sentencing compass problem and why that is such a difficult thing to look at. There is different types of biases and so on. So it's very difficult to solve those types of problems.
It's a very interesting chapter of the book, that part, actually. I'd recommend it. Okay, last question.
Is this whole discussion and discourse about algorithms an attempt to avoid responsibility for our actions? Because in the end, what the algorithm can do, it can describe reality. It cannot really control reality. And at best, it can bring someone to me who tries to sell me something or try to convince me to vote this or vote that. But at the end of the day, it is me who decided to vote for this, or it is me who decided to buy this thing. All the algorithm did is it brought someone to me who is more likely to convince me. And the reason I was chosen is because I was more likely to choose this anyway. But at the end, it's me that chose this.
Yeah, I mean, if I can get carried away on this subject, and I should be careful about it, but the thing about Trump getting elected and like, let's look at personality algorithms and blame them, or let's look at fake news and blame them, it is very important that you find out why people voted for Donald Trump in these elections. And you don't just blame the algorithms. And I think that's related to it. People, they're not... It goes back to thinking that people are just stupid and an algorithm can manipulate them. And I don't think people are stupid. People are very clever. They look at lots of different types of information and then they make their decision. And so you need to find out why they were making those types of decisions.